Maya Whitfield had a rule she'd lived by since she was 11 years old. Never let a room decide who you are before you've had the chance to show it. She'd learned it in the school cafeteria on 6th Street the year her mother died, when a teacher's aide assumed, based on nothing but the color of her skin and the state of her second-hand shoes, that she must be one of the kids who needed the free lunch line explained to her twice. She'd learned it again in high school, when a guidance counselor looked at her transcript and suggested, gently, that maybe a trade school made more sense than the honors track. And she learned it one final, definitive time on a Tuesday evening in October, standing over a barbell loaded with 340 pounds, in the back corner of Ironclad Fitness on Rutherford Avenue, while 11 people who had spent the last 4 minutes laughing at her stood with their phones raised, waiting to watch her fail. She didn't look at them. She chalked her hands, set her feet exactly where Marcus Reddick had trained her to set them 1,000 times before, and pulled. The bar came off the floor clean. Before we continue, I want to know, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and local time in the comments. I'm always amazed at how far these stories travel. To understand what happened in that gym, and why the silence that followed mattered more than the noise that came before it, you have to go back 7 months, to a Sunday afternoon in March, and a 24-year-old dental hygienist named Maya Whitfield carrying a duffel bag into a gym she'd never set foot in before. Maya lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment on Sycamore Court, about 2 miles from the office of Dr. Aaron Prentice, DDS, where she'd worked the front chair for 3 years, cleaning teeth, talking nervous patients through root canals, memorizing the names of their kids and dogs, because it made the whole visit feel less clinical. She clocked in at 8 every morning except Fridays, when she worked a half-day that she guarded like scripture, and clocked out at 5, 4 days a week, a schedule that had become the quiet scaffolding of her adult life. She'd been raised mostly by her grandmother, Odessa Whitfield, in a brick 2-story on Fannin Street in Denton's South Side neighborhood, after Maya's mother, Renee, died of a pulmonary embolism when Maya was 11. Maya still remembered the hospital hallway from that day in more detail than she remembered most of the years right after it. The specific shade of green on the walls, the vending machine that ate her grandmother's dollar and never gave back the bag of pretzels. Her father had never been part of the picture in any meaningful way, a fact Maya had made peace with somewhere around her 16th birthday, filing it away under things she no longer needed to carry. Odessa was 71, sharp as a blade, and had spent 31 years running the cafeteria at Denton Central High before retiring. She still called Maya every evening at 7 o'clock sharp, and Maya still picked up every single time, because that was a rule neither of them had ever needed to say out loud. Odessa's voice, low and unhurried, was the last sound Maya heard most nights before she fell asleep, and had been since she was a girl. Maya had been an athlete her whole life, without ever quite being an athlete anyone noticed. She ran track in middle school, fast, but not fast enough to catch a coach's limited attention in a school with 40 kids trying out for 6 varsity spots. She played volleyball for 2 years at Denton Central and mostly watched from the bench, a fact that used to sting more than she ever let on. She was 5'4" and built compact, dense through the shoulders and hips in a way that made people assume, wrongly, that she carried extra weight she didn't need to carry. What nobody clocked, including Maya for most of her life, was that she was strong, not generally athletic, specifically, unusually strong in the narrow and particular way that shows up on a barbell and almost nowhere else, a kind of strength that has nothing to do with how a body looks in a t-shirt and everything to do with what it can move off the ground. She discovered it by accident, the way most quiet talents get discovered. In January, her co-worker at the dental office, a hygienist named Priya Anand, dragged her to a beginner's strength class at a small studio near the office, mostly because Priya didn't want to walk in alone. The instructor, a retired competitive powerlifter named Marcus Reddick, put a bar loaded to 95 pounds in front of a room of a dozen nervous beginners and asked them to deadlift it for reps. Most of the room fought the weight, fought their own form, fought the unfamiliar mechanics of hinging at the hips instead of rounding the back. Maya picked the bar up like it was a grocery bag she'd carried 100 times before. Marcus Reddick had coached at the regional level for 9 years before a back injury of his own forced him into a slower, quieter kind of life, running this small studio out of a converted auto shop on the edge of downtown Denton. In that time, he'd developed something close to a radar for a specific kind of talent. Not the loud kind that shows up in a college recruiting reel, but the quiet kind that hides inside ordinary-looking people who've simply never once been asked the right question about their own body. He watched Maya set the bar down, exhale, and ask, almost apologetically, if the weight was supposed to feel that easy, and he had to stop himself from grinning too wide because he didn't want to spook her off before he'd even gotten started. "How much do you weigh?" he asked her after class, still holding his clipboard, watching her the way a jeweler watches a stone he suspects might be worth more than the person selling it knows. 149 pounds, give or take, Maya said, a little embarrassed by the sudden attention. "You just deadlifted 95 pounds for 8 clean reps like it was nothing," Marcus said. "Come back Thursday. I want to put some real weight on that bar and see what your body tells us." What happened over the following months was that Maya Whitfield quietly became one of the strongest raw lifters training anywhere in Denton County, and almost nobody knew it because she trained at odd hours, kept to herself, wore an old gray hoodie with the sleeves cut off, and had exactly zero interest in filming herself for anyone's feed. By September, she was pulling 305 pounds for a clean, competition-style single at a body weight of 148, a number that put her within striking distance of the Texas state deadlift record in her weight class. For raw, untested lifters aged 23 to 34, according to the figures Marcus kept in a battered spiral notebook he stubbornly refused to digitize, insisting that some things ought to stay written by hand. "You could go to nationals next year," Marcus told her one Thursday evening in September, after she'd pulled 315 pounds for a clean single that barely raised her heart rate. USAPL Raw Nationals. "I'm not being nice, Maya. This is not a small thing you're doing here." Maya laughed it off, the way she laughed off most compliments, a reflex built from years of learning not to trust rooms that praised her too loudly, too fast. She went home that night and called her grandmother at 7, as always, and told her about the number on the bar, and Odessa said, in the dry, unhurried voice she reserved for the things that mattered most, "Your mother used to carry 2 of you up them stairs on Fannin Street when the elevator broke, baby. Strength runs in this family. Don't act surprised when it shows up in you." By early October, Marcus had convinced Maya to supplement her sessions at his small studio with heavier evenings at Ironclad Fitness, a large commercial gym on Rutherford Avenue with the specialized equipment his studio lacked: calibrated competition plates, a proper platform, a monolift for heavier work. Maya bought a $39 monthly membership and started going 3 evenings a week after her shift at Dr. Prentice's office, usually arriving around 6:30, right when the after-work crowd in the free weight section, tucked in the back corner past the cable machines, was at its loudest and most crowded. That corner of Ironclad Fitness belonged, in the unspoken way these things get decided in every gym in America, to a cluster of regulars who'd claimed it the way certain birds claim a particular tree and defend it without ever quite admitting they're defending anything. At the center of that cluster was Brad Kessler, 31 years old, 6'2", broad through the shoulders, a former junior college offensive lineman who still moved through rooms like he expected them to make way for him, which, mostly, they did. Brad worked as a sales manager at Fowler Motors on the north side of town, moving trucks and SUVs off the lot with an easy, likable patter, and he had a genuine talent for making people laugh. A talent he had never quite learned how to turn off once a joke stopped being funny and started being something else. With Brad, most evenings, was Tyler Voss, 28, who worked IT support for a regional logistics company by day and treated the gym as a stage where he got to be a version of himself he wasn't anywhere else. Sharper-tongued, louder, quicker, with an insult dressed up as a joke, feeding off Brad's energy the way a smaller fire feeds off a bigger one. And there was Chelsea Marsh, 26, a marketing coordinator at First Denton Trust and Savings, who filmed nearly everything on her phone for a fitness page with about 4,000 followers, and had built a small but real reputation for content that skirted the line between funny and cruel, usually at someone else's expense, usually with her own laughter audible under the caption. The three of them, along with a rotating cast of 4 or 5 others who drifted in and out most evenings, had turned the free weight corner into something like a personal comedy club, and for weeks Maya had simply worked around them, headphones in, eyes on her own bar, saying little, absorbing the occasional dip in conversation when she walked past, the muttered comment between Tyler and Brad right as she set up her platform, and deciding, the way she'd decided about 100 small slights across her life, that it wasn't worth the energy of confrontation. She was there to lift. That was the whole plan, the entire calculus. Now that you've met Maya, I have to ask, does her story hit close to home? Have you known someone like her? Someone who carries more than anybody around them ever realizes? Tell me about them in the comments. The Tuesday it happened was October the 14th. Maya had clocked out of Dr. Prentice's office at 5:18, after finishing a longer than usual cleaning on a patient with a lot of nervous questions about flossing technique, driven the 2 miles to Rutherford Avenue, and arrived at Ironclad Fitness at 5:50, earlier than her usual 6:30, because Marcus had written her a program that called for a heavy triple at 305 pounds, followed, if the triple felt clean, by an attempt at a new personal best. She had been building toward this exact session for 6 weeks. 340 pounds, if she hit it, would not just be a personal record. According to the chart in Marcus's spiral notebook, and confirmed twice over by a lifting database Marcus trusted, it would tie the current Texas state deadlift record, raw division, tested and untested combined, for the 148-pound weight class, women's division, ages 23 to 34. Marcus had texted her that morning, "Today's the day if your body says go. Listen to it. Don't force anything, but if it's there, take it." Maya set up on platform 3, the one closest to the mirrored wall, at 6:02. She loaded 2 45-pound plates, 2 25-pound plates, and a 10-pound plate onto each side of the 20-pound bar, for a working weight of 305 pounds, and pulled her triple clean, the bar leaving the floor with the flat, unhurried authority that Marcus had spent 9 months teaching her to trust in her own body. She racked the weight, exhaled slowly, and reached for 2 more 45-pound plates. That was when Brad Kessler noticed the numbers stacked on her bar. "Hold up," Brad said, loud enough to carry, from where he stood loading his own bar 6 feet away. "Is she? Hey, Ty, look at this. She's got 305 on there." Tyler looked over. Chelsea, sitting nearby on a bench scrolling her phone, looked up too, already smiling in anticipation of whatever was coming. "No way," Tyler said, grinning already, the grin of a man reaching for a joke before he's even landed on it. "That's more than my max on a good day. There's no way she's actually lifting that for real," Brad said, and he wasn't quite talking to Maya, not directly, but he wasn't exactly not talking to her either, the way people talk in public spaces when they want an audience but no accountability. "That's got to be for show. Watch, she's gonna pull it 2 inches off the ground and call it a day." Maya heard every word. She kept chalking her hands, kept her eyes on the bar. "Nah, put money on it," Tyler said. $20 says she can't even break the floor with that." "You're on," Brad said. And Chelsea had already lifted her phone, angling it toward platform 3, laughing along with them, the three of them building momentum the way a small group of people do when nobody in the group is the one who says maybe don't. A few others drifted closer, drawn by the noise the way people are always drawn to a gathering crowd. Not because they know what it's about, but because a crowd is its own kind of invitation. Within a minute, 11 people stood loosely around platform 3, some laughing along with Brad and Tyler, a couple looking uncomfortable but silent. One man Maya didn't recognize already murmuring to his friend that this ought to be good. Maya loaded the last 2 plates. 340 pounds now sat on the bar. She did not look at any of them. She set her feet, gripped the bar in a mixed grip, right hand under, left hand over, the way Marcus had drilled into her, checked that her hips were set, took one long breath through her nose, and pulled. The bar rose in one continuous motion. No hitch, no hesitation. 340 pounds traveled from the platform to full lockout in under 2 seconds, Maya's hips driving through hard at the top, exactly the way Marcus had coached her for months. She stood there a moment, bar in hand, chest rising and falling, once, twice, and then lowered it back to the platform with control instead of dropping it, the way a lifter who respects the weight always does. For a second, nobody said anything. The 11 people around platform 3 stood in something close to actual silence, phones still raised, the kind of silence that a loud room falls into only rarely and only when something has genuinely surprised it. Then Chelsea, phone still up, laughed. Not at the lift exactly, more reflexively, the nervous laugh of someone whose face doesn't know what else to do with itself. Brad recovered first. Okay, that's actually kind of impressive, he said, and for one brief moment it seemed like the whole scene might tip toward something like respect. But Brad had an audience now, and Brad Kessler had never once in his life known how to let a laugh die when he suspected there was one more left in the room. I gotta say, though, he went on, turning to his friends instead of to Maya, you don't usually see that from someone who looks like you. No offense, I just mean, you're built kind of small. I figured this was more of a genetics thing, not a, he gestured vaguely at her, not a you thing. What he's trying to say, Tyler cut in, laughing, is he didn't expect the black girl in the back corner to outlift half the guys in this gym. A couple of the onlookers laughed along. One stranger, a man Maya had never seen before, muttered something about it being in the blood, the kind of comment dressed up as a compliment that has been used for 100 years to explain away black excellence as biology instead of what it actually is. Work, discipline, choice, repeated 5 mornings a week for months while everyone else was still asleep. Chelsea kept filming, kept laughing. Oh my God, this is going on the page, she said. This is too good. I mean, come on, Brad said, still riding the laugh, still going. You work at what? A nail salon or something? No offense, I'm just saying, most girls who look like you aren't exactly hitting the platform. You know? This some kind of Instagram thing? You gonna post this? Maya stood there with chalk still dusting her palms, the bar resting on the platform in front of her, and felt something she recognized from 100 smaller moments across her whole life, the particular, specific heat of being turned into a punchline by a room full of people who thought their laughter was harmless because no single one of them intended, specifically, cruelty. She thought of her grandmother's kitchen table on Fannin Street. She thought of Dr. Prentice's waiting room, of every classroom and break room where someone had decided out loud what kind of person she was allowed to be, based on nothing but what she looked like standing still. I work at a dental office, Maya said, quiet, but clear enough to cut through the noise. And I'd like to finish my workout. Whoa, no need to get all serious, Brad said, hands up, still smiling like the joke hadn't landed the way it had. It was a joke. Lighten up. Chelsea's phone was still recording. Maya turned back to the bar, stripped 2 plates from each side with hands that were, she noticed distantly, not quite steady, and finished the rest of her session in a silence of her own making, the laughter behind her rising and falling in waves for another 10 minutes before the group finally drifted back to their own platform, having apparently exhausted whatever they'd needed from her. After what Brad and Tyler just did to Maya, I need to hear your reaction. What would you have done in that moment? Drop it in the comments. Maya drove home that night without turning on the radio. She sat in her car in the parking lot outside her apartment on Sycamore Court for almost 10 minutes before going inside, replaying the last 20 minutes at Ironclad the way you replay a wound to see if it still hurts as much as it did the first time, and finding, each time, that it did. At 7 o'clock, right on schedule, her phone rang. "How was your day, baby?" Odessa asked, and Maya, who had planned to say fine the way she usually did, found the words sticking somewhere in her throat instead. "I had a good lift," Maya said slowly. 340. "That ties the state record, Grandma." "Well, that's wonderful, that's—" Odessa stopped. "Something's wrong. I can hear it in your voice, baby. Tell me." Maya told her. All of it. Brad, Tyler, the nail salon comment, the in the blood comment, the phone held up filming her like a novelty act at a county fair. Odessa was quiet a long moment on the other end of the line, and when she finally spoke, her voice had gone low and careful, the voice she used only for things she'd carried a long time herself. "People been trying to make us into a punchline since before I was your age," Odessa said. "Your great-uncle Willis worked at the mill in Gainesville for 31 years, strongest man I ever knew, and there were men there who used to say the same kind of thing to him, that it was in his blood, like it wasn't sweat, like it wasn't every morning at 5 a.m. hauling steel drums nobody else on that floor could lift, like it wasn't choice." She paused. "You know what he did about it?" "What?" "He kept working, and every year they put the production numbers up on the board in that break room, and every year his numbers were the best on that floor, and after enough years, wasn't a man there who said one more word about blood. Because the numbers don't lie, baby. People do. The numbers never do." Maya went to bed that night, without crying, though she came close twice, and woke the next morning with a decision, half-formed, that she wasn't ready to say out loud yet. She texted Marcus around noon, on her lunch break. "Something happened at Ironclad last night. Can we talk after my shift?" Marcus called instead of texting back, and Maya, sitting in her car behind Dr. Prentice's office, told him everything, start to finish, her voice steadier than she expected it to be by the time she reached the end. Marcus Reddick had coached lifters of every background across 9 years, had watched more than one gifted athlete quietly walk away from the sport, not because their body gave out, but because some room, somewhere, had made them feel like they didn't belong holding a bar in the first place, and something in his chest went tight and old and angry, hearing it happen to Maya specifically. "I want you to hear me clearly," Marcus said. "That lift you hit last night, 340 pounds at 148 body weight, that's not luck, and it's not genetics in the ugly way that man meant it. That's 9 months of 5 a.m. sessions and clean eating, and a work ethic I have seen maybe 3 times in my whole coaching career. You understand me?" "I hear you," Maya said, though she wasn't sure yet that she believed it all the way. "I don't want you to quit Ironclad," Marcus said. Maya went quiet. "I know that's not what you want to hear," he went on. "But listen to me. You've got a meet in mind. I know you do. I've seen the way you look at the qualifier standards on my wall. USAPL state qualifier is 6 weeks out, in Fort Worth. If you pull 340 in that gym, in front of those exact people, at a sanctioned event with a certified judge and a real crowd watching, there is not one word any one of them will ever be able to say to take it away from you. Not one. The bar doesn't care what they think of you. The bar just is what it is." Maya thought about it for 3 days. She skipped her Thursday session at Ironclad, telling herself it was a scheduling conflict, though both she and Marcus knew that wasn't the real reason. On Friday evening, she sat on the porch of her grandmother's house on Fannin Street, eating the collard greens and cornbread Odessa had made, and told her grandmother she was thinking about quitting the gym altogether, maybe finding somewhere quieter, somewhere nobody had ever laughed at her. Odessa set down her fork. "You gonna let them run you off from a room you paid to be in?" "It's not about being run off," Maya said. "It's about not wanting to deal with it anymore." "Baby, I understand not wanting to deal with something," Odessa said gently. "Lord knows I've earned the right to be tired of dealing with things myself. But you didn't tell me this story because you wanted my permission to quit. You told me this story because some part of you already knows you're not the quitting kind. You never have been. Not since you were 7 years old and that boy down the street said you couldn't climb the pecan tree in our yard, and you climbed higher than he ever did, and came down with a busted lip and a grin on your face." Maya laughed despite herself, the first real laugh since Tuesday. "I remember that lip. I remember that grin," Odessa said. "That's the girl I'm talking to right now, whether she can hear herself yet or not. Right now, Maya is about to make a move that changes everything. Before I tell you what she did, what would your next move be? Tell me in the comments." Maya went back to Ironclad Fitness the following Tuesday. She said nothing to Brad, Tyler, or Chelsea when she walked in, kept her headphones on, went to Platform 3, worked through her program exactly as written, ignoring the occasional glance thrown her way from the free weight corner. Marcus had rewritten her plan to build toward the qualifier meet in Fort Worth, 6 weeks out, with a deliberate structure: heavy singles every 10 days, technical work in between, a taper in the final week designed to have her fresh and explosive on meet day. Word travels strangely in a gym, and stranger still online. Chelsea Marsh had, in fact, posted a 15-second clip from that first Tuesday night to her fitness page, not the full exchange, just the lift itself, captioned with something meant to sound like a compliment, but carrying, underneath it, the same flavor of surprise as Brad's comment in the moment. "This tiny girl at my gym just pulled 340 pounds and I'm shook. Didn't expect that from her." The clip picked up a modest amount of attention at first, a few thousand views, comments split between people impressed by the raw number and people who caught exactly the same undertone Maya had heard live. Commenters, several of them black women, asking pointedly what Chelsea had meant by "didn't expect that." Maya never saw the clip herself. She'd stayed deliberately off the gym's social pages since the incident. But Priya, her co-worker at the dental office, saw it during her own scrolling one Wednesday and showed it to Maya at lunch, horrified. "Maya, the lift is incredible, but this caption," Priya said, turning her phone around. "And the comments. People are already calling this out." Maya scrolled through some of the replies, her stomach tightening, and then, for the first time since the incident, felt something shift inside her. Not the hot shame of being laughed at, but something colder and steadier underneath it. Anger, she realized, was actually easier to carry than shame. Shame turned inward. Anger, at least, pointed somewhere. "Let them post whatever they want," Maya said, handing the phone back. "In 6 weeks, I'm not going to need any of them to understand a thing. The numbers are going to do all the explaining I need done." Over the following weeks, Maya trained with a focus that even Marcus, who'd coached serious competitors before, found remarkable. 3 evenings a week at Ironclad, singles building from 315 to 325, each lift crisper than the last, each session a little quieter, a little more contained, like she was gathering something inside herself rather than spending it outward. Brad and his crowd still occupied the corner most evenings, still laughed loudly among themselves, but something in how they watched Maya had changed. The jokes had mostly stopped, replaced by something closer to wary curiosity. The particular attention people pay when they suspect, without wanting to admit it out loud, that they've badly misjudged someone standing right in front of them. Brad, in his own limited way, seemed to feel some real discomfort about the whole episode, though not enough yet to say anything directly to Maya. He mentioned to Tyler one evening in early November, quiet enough that he probably thought Maya couldn't hear from 2 platforms away. "I think we were kind of harsh on her that night. She's clearly dead serious about this. It was just jokes," Tyler said. "She needs to lighten up. Everybody's so sensitive now." "Yeah," Brad said, though something in his voice suggested he wasn't fully convinced of that anymore. A small crack that would widen considerably in the weeks ahead. Chelsea, meanwhile, watched the backlash on her clip grow instead of fade. By late October, the video had crossed 40,000 views, mostly because a larger fitness account with 250,000 followers reposted it with a sharper caption of its own. "The didn't expect that from her. Energy in this caption is exactly the problem. She's a phenomenal lifter, period, full stop." That repost brought a fresh wave of attention, most of it now aimed squarely at Chelsea's original wording, and a smaller but far sharper wave aimed at identifying the gym itself, which someone eventually pinpointed from a logo visible on a water bottle in the background of the clip. Ironclad Fitness's part-time social media manager, a 26-year-old front desk employee named Devon Ruiz, noticed the sudden influx of comments on the gym's own tagged posts sometime in the first week of November. Pointed questions about whether Ironclad tolerated this kind of behavior from its members. A handful of new one-star reviews referencing a hostile environment for Black women, and one longer, detailed comment from a woman identifying herself as a former member, describing a strikingly similar experience she'd had at the gym 18 months earlier. One she said she'd never bothered reporting at the time because she assumed nothing would come of it anyway. Devon brought all of it to the gym's general manager, a woman named Renata Alvarez, who had run Ironclad Fitness for 6 years and prided herself, not without cause, on having built a genuinely diverse membership base in a city that wasn't always easy for that kind of thing. Renata watched the clip 3 times through, read every comment, and felt something cold settle low in her stomach. She pulled Maya's membership file, checked her check-in history, and confirmed that Maya had filed no complaint of her own, had said nothing at all to staff about any incident. Renata called her directly that same afternoon. "Miss Whitfield, this is Renata Alvarez. I'm the general manager over at Ironclad on Rutherford," she said, when Maya picked up during her lunch break. "I'm calling because a video's been circulating that appears to be from our gym floor, and I want to understand, from you directly, what happened, if you're willing to tell me." Maya was quiet a moment, caught off guard. "I appreciate you reaching out," she said finally. "I didn't file anything because I didn't think it would change much of anything, but since you're asking, yes. There was an incident. A few of your regulars made comments while I was lifting, about my race, about what kind of job I must have, implying I couldn't really be lifting that weight, that it had to be some kind of show." Renata listened to the entire account without once interrupting, and when Maya finished, said quietly, "I'm sorry that happened in my gym. That is not the kind of place I want us to be, and I intend to look into this seriously. Would you be willing to come in and speak with me directly, whenever's convenient for you?" Maya agreed to meet the following Monday. The reckoning. The meeting between Maya and Renata Alvarez took place in a small office behind the front desk on a Monday afternoon in mid-November. Maya brought Marcus along for support, at Renata's own suggestion, and the conversation ran nearly an hour. Renata took careful notes, pulled the gym's membership agreement, which included a code of conduct clause explicitly prohibiting harassment based on race, sex, or other protected characteristics, and told Maya she'd be reviewing security footage from the night in question. Ironclad kept overhead cameras on the gym floor, largely for liability and theft prevention, though without audio. The footage confirmed the timeline Maya had described exactly. Brad, Tyler, and Chelsea gathered near Platform 3, gesturing, laughing, phones raised, for a stretch of roughly 11 minutes. Renata called Brad Kessler in 2 days later. Brad arrived expecting, based on Renata's phone call, a general conversation about gym etiquette, and was visibly startled by how seriously Renata was treating the matter. "I want to be straightforward with you," Renata told him. "A member has filed a formal complaint describing racially charged harassment during her workout, corroborated by our own video footage and by public commentary online that has already begun to affect this gym's reputation. I take this seriously, both because it's the right thing to do and because I have an obligation to every single member who trains here to keep this a safe environment for them." Brad, to his credit in that particular moment, didn't try to deny what had happened. "I didn't think of it like that," he said, quieter than Renata had ever heard him. "I thought we were just messing around. I didn't mean anything by it. Intent matters a lot less than you'd think in situations like this," Renata said. "What matters is impact, and the impact here was significant. I'm suspending your membership for 60 days, effective today, and requiring a written apology to Ms. Whitfield as a condition of any reinstatement. I'd also encourage you, separately from anything I can require of you, to think seriously about why your instinct in that moment was to question whether a woman who looks like Ms. Whitfield had any business lifting that kind of weight in the first place." Brad left the meeting visibly shaken. Tyler Voss, called in separately the next day, was less contrite, initially framing the whole thing as an overreaction to just jokes, until Renata informed him the decision was final and his membership suspended as well, at which point his tone shifted toward anger, though he ultimately complied rather than escalate further. Chelsea Marsh's situation moved faster and further than either man's because Chelsea's own clip had already left the boundaries of the gym entirely. By the 3rd week of November, the video, now edited together by several different accounts with fuller context Chelsea's own phone had captured, including several seconds of Brad's genetics comment and Tyler's remark about not expecting the black girl in the back corner to lift like that. Audio Chelsea's phone had picked up without her fully realizing how much it caught, had been viewed more than 2 million times across platforms. Chelsea's employer, First Denton Trust and Savings, received enough public inquiry about the video, some directed straight at the bank's own social accounts, that the bank issued a statement distancing itself from the incident and 3 days later placed Chelsea on administrative leave pending review, a review that concluded the following month with her position eliminated, officially framed as restructuring, understood by everyone involved as something else entirely. Brad's employer, Fowler Motors, faced a smaller but still real version of the same pressure. Enough customer comments and reviews referencing the video that the dealership's owner, Gerald Fowler, sat Brad down personally in his office on a Thursday afternoon. "I'm not going to pretend this doesn't affect the business," Gerald told him. "We sell trucks to every kind of person in this county, and I can't have my sales manager's name attached to something like this, circulating online. I'm not firing you outright, Brad, because I've known you 6 years and I don't believe you're rotten clean through. But you're moving off sales manager, you're taking a pay cut, and you're completing a sensitivity training program on your own dime before we even talk about you getting that title back." Brad accepted the terms without argument, and later that same week sat down and wrote a letter to Maya that he delivered, in person, to Ironclad's front desk for Renata to pass along. An act that genuinely surprised Renata, who had expected, if anything, silence or a lawyer. "Ms. Whitfield," the letter read, in Brad's blunt, unpolished handwriting. "I've had a hard couple weeks thinking about what I said to you that night, and I want to say I'm sorry, and I mean it, not because of the trouble it's caused me, though there's been plenty of that, but because I keep thinking about how it must have felt to be lifting more weight than I've ever pulled in my life, and have somebody standing there questioning whether you even earned it. That was wrong of me, I don't have a good excuse for it. I hope your meet goes well. You earned that lift, and I should have said so from the start, instead of turning it into a joke. Maya read the letter twice over, sitting in her car outside the gym, and felt something complicated settle in her chest. Not quite forgiveness, not yet, but something adjacent to it. A recognition, at least, that the letter had been honest. Maya's voice was finally heard. But here's what I want to know. Have you ever had a moment where you stood your ground and the truth finally came out? Share that story in the comments. Someone watching right now needs to hear it. The USAPL state qualifier meet took place on the last Saturday of November at a community recreation center in Fort Worth, 40 minutes from Denton. Odessa came, sitting in the third row of folding chairs with a homemade sign that read simply, Whitfield in block letters, because Odessa had never been one for elaborate gestures. Marcus stood at the edge of the platform as her coach, clipboard in hand, calm on the outside the way coaches learn to be, even when their stomachs are churning underneath it. Priya came, and so, unexpectedly, did Devon Ruiz from Ironclad's front desk, who had followed the whole story closely and asked Maya, almost shyly, if he could come watch her lift. Maya opened her deadlift flight at 305 pounds, a number she could have hit half asleep by that point, and took it clean, the bar rising with the same flat, unhurried authority it always carried. Her second attempt, at 325, came up just as clean, and the small crowd inside the recreation center, mostly other lifters and their families, applauded with the specific warmth that powerlifting crowds reserve for a clearly gifted competitor having a very good day. For her third and final attempt, Marcus called for 345 pounds, 5 pounds beyond the mark that had tied the state record back at Ironclad, and enough, if she took it clean under sanctioned competition conditions, to set an outright new record for her weight class and age division. Maya stood behind the bar a long moment before approaching it, chalk dust rising faintly in the recreation center's fluorescent light. She thought briefly of Platform 3 at Ironclad, of Brad's voice saying there's no way she's actually lifting that, of Chelsea's phone held up like Maya was a spectacle instead of a person, and she let the thought pass through her the way Marcus had taught her to let distraction pass, acknowledged, not fought, simply allowed to move on through and out the other side. She gripped the bar. She pulled. 345 pounds left the platform floor and rose to full lockout in a motion so clean the head judge's white light came on almost before the bar had fully settled, followed a half-second later by both side judges' lights. A unanimous 3-white decision. The recreation center erupted, not into the stunned silence of that Tuesday at Ironclad, but its exact opposite. A room full of strangers on their feet, applauding a new state record set by a 148-pound dental hygienist from Denton, Texas, who 3 weeks earlier had seriously considered quitting the sport for good. Odessa stood in the third row, sign shaking in her hands, tears she didn't bother hiding running freely down her face, and when Maya found her afterward in the crowd, Odessa held her granddaughter's face in both hands and said, simply, "Numbers don't lie, baby. I told you they wouldn't." The story of Maya's record lift, paired inevitably with the video from Ironclad Fitness that had already circulated so widely, found its way into local news within the week. A segment on a Fort Worth television station, a write-up in the Denton Record Chronicle, both framing the story as one of resilience and vindication rather than victimhood, a framing Maya herself insisted on every time a reporter called. "I don't want this to be a story about what those people said to me," Maya told one local reporter, sitting in her grandmother's living room on Fannin Street for the interview, Odessa just visible in the kitchen doorway behind her. "I want it to be a story about what happens when you keep showing up anyway. The comments were never going to be the thing that decided who I am. Only I get to decide that." Ironclad Fitness, in the wake of the incident and its aftermath, implemented a formal anti-harassment training program for all staff and posted a revised code of conduct prominently near the front desk, a change Renata Alvarez credited directly to what happened to Maya, telling a local reporter that sometimes it takes one member's courage in speaking up to force an institution to finally do what it should have already been doing on its own. 6 months later, in the spring, Maya competed at USAPL Raw Nationals in a hotel conference center outside Kansas City, placing fourth in her weight class against lifters who'd been competing at that level for years, a result Marcus called, without any exaggeration, remarkable for someone only in her second year of serious training. She still worked 4 days a week at Dr. Prentice's dental office, still answering nervous questions about flossing with the same patience she always had. She still trained 3 evenings a week, though she'd switched permanently back to Marcus's smaller studio, not out of any lingering resentment toward Ironclad, whose management she'd come to genuinely respect for how seriously they'd handled the whole situation, but simply because the quieter space suited the way she liked to work best. Brad Kessler, 6 months on, was still employed at Fowler Motors, had completed his sensitivity training in full, and had, in a small but noted gesture, become one of the loudest voices at the dealership advocating for a charity drive that ended up donating $4,000 to a local youth athletics program serving underprivileged kids in Denton's South Side neighborhood, a gesture Maya heard about secondhand and regarded, cautiously, as evidence that people are sometimes capable of becoming more than the worst thing they've ever said in a gym on a Tuesday night. Chelsea Marsh eventually found work at a marketing firm 2 counties over, and the fitness page she'd once run with such enthusiasm sat mostly dormant now, its most viewed post remaining, indefinitely, the 15-second clip she never expected to define her the way it ultimately did. Maya Whitfield still thinks, sometimes, about those 11 minutes on Platform 3, but less often than she used to, and with far less heat when she does. What she thinks about more, these days, is the way the recreation center in Fort Worth went loud instead of quiet, the way her grandmother's hand-lettered sign shook through the applause, the way real strength has a habit of eventually making its own case, in its own time, to anyone patient enough to wait for the bar to finally come off the ground. If this story resonated with you, or if you've got a story of your own you've never been able to tell, share it in the comments below. Every voice deserves to be heard.